again, and thank you for attending this session. I just wanted to go over some few housekeeping items first. Can you please use the Q&A box that's in the WAHOVA? It's going to be on the right-hand side of your screen, and if you want to ask any questions, we'll get to the questions after the presentation. And then also wanted to remind everybody when participating and encouraging at ISCORE, please follow the etiquette guidelines and also the ISU principles of community. And then for at the end of the session, please complete the survey at the WAHOVA app, which is going to be found on the left-hand side of the screen. And then, so now I'm going to go ahead and introduce the session presenter, who is Chelsea Davis. And her title of her presentation is Sex Workers on TikTok, Transparency, Normalization, and Algorithm-Based Marginalization. And Chelsea is a graduate student in the journalism and mass communication, and she's also a communication specialist for the ISU News Service.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to my presentation. I hope you've enjoyed ISCORE so far. I know it's a little bit different this year, but I think it's been really great. Okay, so let me share my PowerPoint. I think. Here we go. Okay. All right, so like Sarah said, my name is Chelsea Davis, and I'm a master's student in the Greenlee School of Journalism and Communication. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm also a communication specialist for ISU News Service. So this study came about as part of a Women's and Gender Studies course that I took last fall with Dr. Michelle Shaw about feminist theory. We had to do a study, and this is a preliminary study. I'll preface with that it's not complete yet, but the data analysis is about partway done, and I need to do interviews, but I'm excited to share with you what I've discovered so far. And I would like you all to keep an open mind, and let's put any judgments or assumptions aside. I know this is a topic that can be seen as taboo by some people. Okay. So we need to start off with some definitions. Sex work is a term that was coined by Carol Lee, who writes as Scarlet Harlot in the late 1970s. She had gone to a conference and objected to the use of the phrase sex use industry. She wanted to shift that view to seeing sex workers as humans with sexual and bodily autonomy and not as objects to be used. We use the term sex work instead of prostitution because prostitution is understood as a form of sex or human trafficking, and that's based in coercion, whereas sex work is based in autonomy and consent. And sex work has understanding beyond academia. It's become an umbrella term, and it encompasses not only what we think of typically when we think of sex work, but also exotic dancing, escort services, pornography, and so on and so forth. So we also need to understand what TikTok is. It's a short form mobile video social media platform. That's the boring definition. I know you probably know it from a lot of the dance videos that have gone viral. People have especially been using it over the past year during quarantine to share funny or other ways that they have coped. And then lots of pet videos, of course. I know that's what I see a lot on my feed. It's also where users can find communities based on their own identities, experiences, things they want to learn about. So that's where we come to the sex work industry. It gives us unprecedented insight into this industry directly from sex workers themselves. But what we need to understand is that increased visibility doesn't always extend to everyone. So that means BIPOC sex workers, queer sex workers, workers who hold other marginalized identities. They can sometimes be doubly othered here. And so I also want to explain a little bit about myself. I think it's important for researchers to recognize their own perspectives and lenses that they bring to a study. So I'm a white cisgender woman, and I don't have any direct experience with sex work or sex workers. So I'm coming to this as an outsider, and I really want to understand from the sex workers themselves, their own experiences. Okay. So we're using feminist media theory to study this. That is where we are applying the concepts of feminist theory to the various ways that media are created, organized, and received. What that means is we're applying a feminist lens when we examine media. And media is, the broad term. Here we're looking at social media. Those media themselves don't have to be inherently feminist media. It's simply the way that we approach our study. And so fourth wave feminists, we're currently technically in fourth wave feminism. They perceive their experience of the online universe as just a part of life. And that includes activist usage of social media, which I know we've seen a lot of with Black Lives Matter, the Women's March, etc. And the fourth wave is about 2008 to now. It focuses a lot on intersectionality and globalization, especially with social media and new technologies and grassroots activism. We don't have time to get into the US sex wars of the 1980s, but I think that's important to point out that there was an anti-pornography versus sex-positive feminist battle, probably isn't the right word, but that's what occurred during the 1980s and led to more of the sex positivity that we're seeing today. Okay, so then we move on to intersectionality. We need to approach this, this study with an intersectional lens, and what that means and where that came from was Kimberly Crenshaw. In the 1980s, she coined the term, although the ideas had been there previously, and intersectionality is the various interdependent ways that a person's identities affect their place in the world and their ability to resist oppressive systems. So for example, a Black woman is not only Black at this moment and a woman in the next, she is all of her identities, including these two and so much more, all at once. And that unique experience is, of course, different from my experience. It's important to bring this lens to this research because each sex worker is a complex person with intersecting identities. And we also need to understand people's personal experiences because you can theorize from that location. And that comes from Bell Hooks. She's a renowned feminist, social activist, and author. So through openly talking about their work, sex workers can reclaim and empower themselves and their bodies. We need to examine social media's uses through a feminist intersectional lens in order to understand the multiple ways that sex work could be further marginalized. Okay, so sex work and sex positivity and how these are related. Sex positivity is an ideology that centers on open-mindedness, not bringing judgment into our viewpoints, and respect of personal sexual autonomy, all with consent. That's important. That's the difference between sex work and sex and human trafficking, prostitution, the idea of consent versus coercion. So like I said before, sex work has this understanding beyond academia. That's why it's a useful term to use when we're studying this issue. And it's a complex activity of networking and self-promotion. And we really see that on the internet. The internet gives us this insight into the industry through interactions with sex workers themselves on both a professional and personal level. Okay, so TikTok. I think we probably all know what this is, but just in case you're not on it, because I know a lot of us older folks are not, it launched in the United States in 2017, and the biggest chunk of its users are Gen Z, which right now they're about 16 to 24 years old. So TikTok has community guidelines, just like any other platform does, and has various reasons for either deleting videos or removing content creators from their platform. Excuse me. So in the last half of this last year, more than 89 million videos were removed for violating community guidelines. Now that's only about 1% of the videos that were uploaded. About 21% were for displaying adult nudity and sexual activities, and about 6 to 7 for harassment and bullying. Now, of course, we can't talk about social media without talking about algorithms. Algorithm, in essence, is a process of rules and instructions. So in this case of social media, it's how, you're looking at your social media feed, and some content is always getting boosted higher in your feed than others. Now, some users have accused TikTok of what's called shadow banning, and that's essentially the platform suppressing their content, limiting their visibility, and Black Lives Matter activists, some of them on TikTok, accused the platform of doing this last year. So it can create these baselines, this assumption of this is what is popular, this is what should be pushed to the top of users' feeds, and that can further other already marginalized communities, and that can extend to topics like sex work. Okay, so here's where the two intersect. TikTok can be an opportunity to interact with sex workers as full human beings. They're not objects to be used. And it also gives a platform for sex workers to talk openly about their work, including its benefits and its downsides. Due to the globalization of technology, we hear about all of the benefits that can have, but these new technologies can also recreate the exclusions and marginalizations that they proclaim to erase. And sex workers often have to walk what I call this tightrope of professional amateurism. So this is prevalent in a lot of sex work that has an online presence, such as adult webcam models. There's growing demand for these sex workers to be both authentic and desirable. Is a common intersecting trait that we see. With increased visibility and access comes increased opportunities for exclusion, toxicity, and harassment on social media, especially for those who are BIPOC and or queer. So what we often see a lot as they're walking this tightrope is they have sexual autonomy, but they also understand that they need to employ some strategic visibility. So they're understanding that opening themselves up on a public platform is not risk-free, and they need to be strategic in how they make certain parts of their lives invisible to safeguard themselves, because there are many who have been harassed, cyberbullied, doxxed online. And here I put a quote from a TikTok that has since been removed since the last time I looked up all of these. But she said, "Sex workers are not dumb. You have no idea what these people have been through. They are overcomers. That is an extremely hard industry to be in. Just because you are a sex worker, it doesn't make you dumb. It doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you anything." Okay. So here's where we arrive at our questions, our research questions. How do sex workers use and experience TikTok? That's something that we need to understand. More specifically, we need to understand how people of color and queer people who are sex workers use and experience TikTok. So we're gonna try to figure this out through textual analysis of TikTok posts about sex work, followed by interviews with sex workers who use TikTok. And textual analysis, I should explain that probably. That's so what I did was I searched various keywords that are related to sex work on the platform, and then I analyze all of those posts for their salient points. And then interviews, we want to understand more in depth about each person's personal experiences using the platform. Okay, so this is preliminary findings since this study isn't quite done yet, but I want to share what we have so far. So posts using these hashtags, which of course are not exhaustive, there's hundreds, thousands of hashtags that we can search. They've garnered millions of views. Now, the ones I have listed here, these were from a search in this past November, and I'll explain a couple of these hashtags later. I know those sound, or they look confusing at first. So millions and millions of views. Now, sex workers posting on TikTok, sometimes they'll use misspellings or symbols in the middle of words that they believe could otherwise get them shadow banned or just simply banned from the website. So for example, they'll use SW for sex worker, OF for OnlyFans. Sometimes they'll throw numbers or symbols into these words so that they may not show up as easily. Okay, so we're gonna get into, oh, right, sorry. So when I was like, you know, I need to look again this week just to see, you know, how many more views have these videos gotten? Well, when I looked yesterday, a lot of these terms are no longer searchable. Variations on them are, but many of them, these specific words, these specific hashtags, you can't find videos with those. And I think it's also interesting to point out that of the approximately 100 videos that I pulled from this past fall, majority were white, the majority were cisgender women. So we didn't see BIPOC. Sometimes there are queer sex workers who will pop up higher in the search results, but not often. And since the last time I had looked up all of these in November, about half have been removed. The videos themselves have been removed, or the creators themselves have been banned. They've had to change their names, or they're just disappeared completely. Okay, so how do sex workers use and experience TikTok? I found themes when I was doing my textual analysis of the videos that I found. Okay, so a common theme running through nearly all of the posts about sex work was activism, with the user either advocating for themselves or for others who are sex workers. Many of them had phrases like sex work is real work or support sex workers on their posts. And this theme of activism, it also frequently intersected with the other themes that I'll cover, which that's important because we see the various techniques that sex workers and allies are using to get their message across and to get their voices heard. Activist posts tended to vary between the binary of positive or negative. So positive activist posts, they shared information about sex work to combat stereotypes, and they encouraged viewers to support sex workers. Negative activist posts, they shined a light on the risks and the harassment that is sometimes faced by sex workers, or they ensured that viewers would see that sex work is, like so many other types of work, not an easy job. So one sex worker whose account has since been removed spoke up in defense of another sex worker who was being harassed, which was that quote that I had on a previous slide. Some made blanket support sex workers statements, while others, they dove deeper into the legal and policy issues, and then others made it clear that their activism was not in a silo. They intersected it with other movements such as Black Lives Matter. And so I've pulled some quotes from videos that I found that had an activist theme. I didn't include the videos themselves to protect identities, But what we had here was someone saying, why have men been allowed to capitalize off women's bodies in the name of art for centuries? But once a woman holds the camera and capitalizes on her own image, she, quote, belongs to the streets. And then the audio goes, oh, it was sexism. Here's a quote from another video whose creator has since had her account banned. She said, people comment that we should only talk about how sex work is empowering and great and positive. It's just not for some people, and that's okay. If we pretend that it's perfect and great and empowering for everyone all the time, then it just creates this false narrative that makes it even harder for survival workers and other workers that struggle with the job. So they're showing some of the, it's not all positive all the time. Another theme was, I sort of lumped these together, education / behind the scenes. So education could be mistaken as being interchangeable with activism, but in this context, education was conceptualized as a theme because of the sex workers who wanted to explain what they do and give viewers behind the scenes insight into the everyday situations that they face. This information ranged from the amount of money that they make to suggestions on how to get into the industry, to the possible risks and rewards, to deconstructing misconceptions. So there was another user who described herself as an escort. Her account has also since been removed, but she talked about the business savvy that she needs in order to succeed, such as developing a fee structure, navigating taxes, creating a brand, all of these things that she has to do to be successful. And so here again, I pulled a couple of quotes. To all the, I'll blur that out, out there saying sex workers are dirty. Honey, most people my age go out blind drunk and shag 3 to 5 people a week. Don't even remember if they protected themselves. What's worse is they only go to the doctor to get an STI check if they feel something's itchy. I, on the other hand, am at my doctor's rain, hell, or shine every 1 to 3 months. I'm always packing. She held up a condom there. And I'm lining my pockets with cash, doing something that makes me and others feel good. Here's another quote from a different video. Let's talk about my favorite client category, couples. Couples come to see me for all different types of reasons. So for example, they might be coming to explore together, or there might be a medical condition, say sex is really painful for the wife, or perhaps one of the partners is terminally ill and they don't have the ability to have sex. Okay, here was another theme, anti-harassment. Now this wasn't frequently seen with sex workers directly responding to harassing comments that they received on videos as expected, although those comments exist. Instead, often it was sex workers speaking out generally about the types of harassment that they face, such as insults about their intelligence and hygiene, slut shaming and body shaming, receiving unsolicited sexual advances, and experiencing sexism in a variety of ways. Now, I expected to see a lot more racism, homophobia, transphobia in these posts, but it should be noted that the majority of the posts that garnered the most views were made by white cisgender women. Now, here's a couple of, on the left-hand side is one video. A person said, "You do not have a body that is attractive to people. Face facts." Well, the sex worker responded, "You're saying this to someone who literally has a job that is sexual. If your statement was true, then I wouldn't be making any money, yet I do." And here's another from another video. "This is a PSA to all the men that slut shame me for being in the adult industry and who tell me that my dad must be so proud. Firstly, yes, my dad is very proud that I supported myself through 2 degrees and 10 years of study without having to ask them for help while still building a 6-digit business that I have run for 6 years." Okay, now the last theme was humor. And this was used a lot and often with the other themes in order to get their message across, really draw people in, hold them there, and share what they have to say. So one audio clip, which is in the dotted outline box, this was used frequently with posts by or about sex workers, but it actually came from a post that originally had nothing to do with sex work. So this TikTok user had created this tongue-in-cheek song. He was joking about, "Oh, I'm an accountant," when the conversation steered toward the fact that he was a struggling actor, and that was too awkward to share with people. And so I wrote there, it's not as catchy written out as it is sung, but the song that he created. So sex workers use this clip a lot in their posts, and often with the hashtag I'm an accountant, which is what you saw in that earlier slide that looked out of place with all of the other hashtags. A lot of the top videos with this sound are by sex workers. They use the clip to make a joke out of the discomfort they sometimes feel when they're asked about their job in a society that views sex work as amoral. And the clips I've posted here with asterisks are just me describing what was in the video because they didn't have any actual audio besides the sound. So there were images of people putting up a dancing pole in the room or joking about how much money they make, exotic dancers in a dressing room. Every once in a while, one of those top videos was an actual accountant who was very confused by the recent attention that their job title had received. Oh, wait, I should also say, there were a couple other themes that were not as prevalent, but I still want to mention them. I think it's important. Body positivity and sex positivity, they came up pretty frequently. Sex positivity, obviously, because of the nature of the job. Body positivity, it was seen explicitly only a few times, and particularly in posts by sex workers who have larger bodies. Instead, body positivity was seen subtly in sex workers wearing whatever they wanted without regard for what women are told that they should wear. Another theme that was inherent to most posts, but usually not explicit, was promotion or marketing. So sex workers often use social media as a marketing tool to direct people to the services they offer, or maybe their other social media. And here's where the professional amateurism that I previously mentioned comes into play. Viewers are able to get to know sex workers in a way that they wouldn't be able to otherwise. Okay, so next steps. I think it's important to point out, I didn't put this on the previous slides, but every quote that I used in this presentation came from white women sex workers, 3 of whom on their actual profiles identified themselves as gay, queer, or pansexual. But this leads us to our second research question, which is asking, where are the BIPOC sex workers? Where are the queer sex workers? Why aren't we hearing from them? They don't rise to the top in these searches. When you do these searches, it's all white cisgender women, which is fine, but we need to understand the whole story, which is why we need to conduct interviews to get this in-depth personal understanding about their lives, why they use this social media platform, and the experiences they have on it. So sex workers have long been represented in the media as deviant, filthy, illicit. Their mere representation, just merely having them out there as a character or on social media as, a real person, that's insufficient to dispel the myths and the stereotypes about the sex work industry. The dichotomy of this good, bad binary, where sex workers are considered bad and the people who are not sex workers are good. This results in sex workers being reduced to being labeled commodities. They're portrayed as products rather than producers. So to represent themselves more accurately, sex workers have taken it upon themselves to make their work lives transparent by having this open dialogue on social media. As I said previously, we've uncovered 4 themes so far: activism, education, anti-harassment, and humor. Those are the ways they're using TikTok right now. This open dialogue allows for honest discussions of the risks and the rewards inherent in the job. And in doing so, they're defying these expectations of the male gaze. They're refusing to be seen or treated as sex objects, but as people with bodily autonomy and sexual agency. Okay, thank you so much. If you have any questions, if you want to share anything you've learned, if you have any advice or suggestions, things I should do as this study progresses forward, please let me know, either in the comments here, or you're welcome to email me anytime. And thank you so much for attending. There we go.
Okay, and as Chelsea said, if you want to add any questions over on the right-hand side in the screen, there's a place for Q&A, or you can also add them in the Zoom chat.
Thanks. I see that someone said no more TikTok for my kids. I will say, now I don't know, I don't have children who, well, I don't have children, but I saw that TikTok has created something that if you're under a certain age, when you sign up for an account, it recognizes your age and it won't allow you to see certain content, I think. I wouldn't quote me on that, but I know there was something recently that they published about that.
Okay, Chelsea, we are getting a couple questions. One of them is, do you have any impressions why BIPOC sex workers seem to be underrepresented on TikTok?
Of course, this is just me speaking from a preliminary study, but you know, I think it's just the way algorithms work sometimes. Ooh, sorry, my computer. You know, they're not getting as much interaction as other videos, and therefore, if you're not getting that interaction, the way algorithms work, your videos are not going to have more reach. And so there's a lot of racism and sexism involved in this.
Okay, another question is, you mentioned a lot have disappeared. Do they come back in another account or do they generally give up?
Oh, yeah. So I noticed that from what I could find, I'm trying to think. Some of them did come back with different accounts, which sometimes I can't find because I only knew their original account name. Sometimes they were close enough that they did appear in a search. Of course, they have thousands fewer followers now because all of their previous content was removed. Some of them, yeah, they just disappear entirely, or they do create new accounts, which then sometimes also get banned.
Another question from the Zoom chat. Do you see benefits to the filtering for community standards on TikTok, or should this feature be adjusted?
The filtering. So I guess I'm not entirely sure what they mean by that. I don't know if you'd want to. Oh no, that was a second question.
Yeah. Well, maybe if that person wants to add some more
Sure.
context. There's another question. Any comments on sex workers becoming de facto educators on sex ed? I have seen so many comments that watching TikTok videos have taught young people more safe sex practices than their upbringing / education ever did.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, TikTok did not exist, of course, when I was growing up, but I know, I'm sure we all experienced and learning about sex in different ways that was not from school. Yeah, I mean, there are benefits and of course there are downsides, just as some kids, if they watch pornography, that's not an entirely accurate representation of sex, and maybe they're not learning safe sex practices from that. So, you know, there probably are this is not a great answer, but there's benefits and downsides to learning from social media about sex. I think that says a lot about our education system, though, if people are having to turn elsewhere.
And then another question about being banned. Are some users simply being banned because TikTok itself has a legal obligation to ban them, or is there a rule or a guideline that TikTok creates and polices?
Oh, yeah. So TikTok does have community guidelines that they will remove videos. Of course, I'm not sure entirely how it works on their end, but there's also an option on me as a viewer. If I see something that I think violates the guidelines, I can report that person or that video, and it will go under review in line with their community guidelines to see if it's something that needs to be removed.
And with those quotes that you were including, are those that, that's just not what people have posted up. That's what they've, usually it's a video of them saying that. Is that correct? And there could be other content that might be the reason for that's taken down, because that was one of my questions. The very first quote you said, it was in that orange box, I think, and it was taken down. It was just saying that sex workers, are any of those things, I think. That in itself didn't seem like it would, make that post banned, but I didn't know if there was more, included with that.
Right. Yeah. I wonder if I mislabeled that. It probably was, I'll need to go back and look at the data. I think that was actually a full account that was banned. So
Okay.
maybe not that specific TikTok. I can't imagine why that one would have been, like you said, but yeah, I think their entire account was taken down.
Okay. Another question. When doing your research, did you also come across human trafficking TikToks? This person says, they attended a conference about human trafficking and they mentioned how TikTok was being used as a marketing place. They just wondered if you came across any of that in your research.
Oh, wow. That's scary. No, I didn't, but I also wasn't specifically looking for that.
Yeah.
I do not doubt that that is there, just like any other social media platform, unfortunately. That would be a good study.
And again, while people are still thinking of questions, just wanted to remind people to provide feedback on this session for Chelsea. I think if you go over on the left-hand side under surveys is where you can access that. Another question here. Have you as a researcher received pushback from others on this topic?
I guess no, although this hasn't been shared that widely. So maybe if I do, I will get pushback. I know if I explain it to people in my personal life, sometimes their first reaction when I say sex work is, ugh, just that initial misunderstanding of what I'm talking about.
Do you ever just say you're studying accountants? No, just kidding.
Yeah. You should go look up some of those videos. They're funny of actual being like, oh, I didn't know that's what I did.
In the Zoom chat, someone asked, is this unique research as far as you can tell, a subject no other researcher has been exploring? Or have you come across other similar research?
I suppose elements of it I've come across. I haven't been able to find a ton of research on TikTok just because it's relatively new. Of course, there is some out there. And there's lots of research on sex work, and there's a long history of that. but how the two intersect, I haven't found any, but that doesn't mean it's not out there. I just need to keep looking. And I've seen lots of news articles about it.
How do you go about the interviews? Is it just through email or on TikTok itself, or how do you put yourself out there and let them contact you?
Oh yeah, so that's going to be my next step is recruitment. So I need to reach out and find BIPOC and queer sex workers who are willing to be interviewed and have them reach out to me. And then hopefully it will work out that we can do a video interview or maybe a phone call. Interviews, I should say.
Another question on the chat. Did you have to get IRB approval?
Oh, so because this was part of a class project, no, but going forward, if I really want to move forward with this study and seek out conference or publication, then yeah, I'm going to need IRB approval.
Well, Chelsea, thank you so much for presenting